She thought marrying a rich man meant her struggles were over. But that mansion held storms no one warned her about. Some women walk into a room and the air changes. Not 'cause they loud, not 'cause they flashy, but 'cause life done shaped 'em into something unshakable. That was Nia. Tall, dark-skinned, with cheekbones kissed by God, and eyes that told you she'd seen too much to be fooled again. She walked into that mansion carrying her dignity like a crown, but they only saw her skin, not her soul. It was a June wedding, sky clear, guests pale, flowers loud. Nia wore ivory, the kind of ivory that makes folks whisper, but it was her skin that made them stare. All except him, Matthew. He loved her like she was the sun, and he was finally warm. Met her at a gallery in Harlem. She was curating the Black Futures exhibit. He was there with a trust fund and an empty calendar. But baby, she filled him up like poetry. You make everything feel real, he'd said that night, looking at her like she was more than a woman, like she was a mirror to a world he'd never been allowed to see. But see, love don't cancel the weight of legacy, especially when legacy wears pearls and smiles with precision. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore Hastings, Matthew's mother. Old money, old rules, and a heart cold enough to freeze fire. She didn't raise her voice, didn't roll her eyes. She just paused. Every time Nia spoke, Eleanor's silence stretched like a judgment. At the wedding, Eleanor kissed Nia on the cheek and whispered, "Let's hope you can keep up with our kind of life, our kind." Like Nia was a stray walking through a museum. But Nia just smiled, soft but sharp. She'd heard worse growing up on Edgecombe Avenue. The mansion came after the vows, white pillars, red roses, and a chandelier that looked like it cried stars. But every corner whispered, "You don't belong here." Nia tried. God knows she tried. Fresh flowers every Sunday, Southern sweet tea on the veranda. She even joined the local charity circle. All white, all polished, all watching her like a stain they couldn't scrub. One night she overheard it. Eleanor on the phone, voice sweet as honey, but thick with venom. "I just think she's a bit too urban, darling. Beautiful, yes, but not quite wife material. Not for Matthew. She doesn't understand our world. Too urban. Like her soul had a zip code Eleanor couldn't stomach." Nia didn't cry. She closed that door and let the words settle in her bones. See, pain don't always scream. Sometimes it sits quiet, waiting for its moment to rise. And Nia, she was already building her silence into a weapon. The next day, Eleanor invited her to brunch. Just the two of them. White linen, crystal glasses, and a plate of eggs Nia couldn't taste. Eleanor smiled, slicing a croissant like it wronged her. "Nia, dear, tell me, do your people have a tradition for prenups? Or is that considered offensive where you're from?" Nia blinked. "Aunt Grace swear to you." She blinked slow, like a queen watching a jester dance. "My people," Nia said, voice silk-wrapped steel. "We believe in promises kept, but we also know how to survive betrayal." Eleanor's smile slipped for just a second, but Nia had already seen it, the velvet knife behind every compliment. She walked out of that brunch with her back straight and her mind sharper than ever, because now she knew this wasn't just marriage, it was war dressed in lace, and the first battle wasn't over Matthew's heart, it was over the mirror on the grand staircase. The one Eleanor had already decided Nia's face was too dark to reflect. But baby, that mirror ain't seen nothing yet. Because Nia, she was about to turn that whole house upside down. And then she opened the drawer Eleanor told her never to touch. Some doors we walk through. Others we pry open with quiet rage. The drawer sat beneath Eleanor's writing desk. Cherry wood, polished till it gleamed like a lie. Nia had passed it every day since she moved in. Always locked, always whispered about. "Just old documents," Eleanor once said, sipping chamomile with a smile thin as thread. "But some things are too delicate for young eyes." Delicate? That's what they called the things they wanted to keep hidden. Like bruises covered in silk, like words spoken behind doors, thick with privilege. But on that morning, Eleanor had left for her weekly luncheon, a charity board full of women who smelled like lilac and judgment, and she'd forgotten her key. It hung from a gold chain, left dangling carelessly on the velvet bench by her vanity. Almost like a dare. Nia stared at that key for 10 full minutes. Not out of fear, out of knowing that once some truths come out, you can't fold them back into silence. She unlocked the drawer. Inside, a folder thick with paper, bound in red silk ribbon. She opened it slow, like peeling back skin. First, photos, black and white. A young Matthew, but not with Eleanor. No, baby. This woman was darker, softer. She had cheekbones like Nia, hair like Nia, eyes like grief in bloom. Nia turned the photo over. 2 words in elegant cursive. Melanie, 1991. Then letters, dozens, all addressed to Matthew Whitmore from MLH, written in a looping hand. Love letters. My darling boy, your laugh reminds me of summer. They won't let me see you, but I dream of you every night. Nia's hands trembled. She flipped through the pages, each word a needle, each sentence a wound. And then came the last one, a note from Eleanor, scrawled on thick stationery, sealed in gold. Melanie will not be a part of his life. She made her choice when she chose to keep him. I will not have that bloodline dilute the Hastings name. Money has been arranged. This is the end of it. Melanie, the woman in the photo. Matthew's real mother? Nia stepped back like the drawer bit her. The room tilted. Her breath caught somewhere between fury and heartbreak. All these years, Matthew thought Eleanor was his mother. He loved her, protected her, took pride in the Hastings name. But it was built on betrayal. Nia closed the folder, locked the drawer, but she couldn't lock away what she now knew. When Eleanor returned that afternoon, her eyes scanned Nia's face like always, looking for cracks, signs of inferiority. But Nia just smiled, calm, measured, and said, "Your roses are dying. I think the roots are rotting." Eleanor blinked, but said nothing, because Eleanor had never seen Nia angry. Not yet. She was about to learn, though, 'cause Nia had no plans to scream. She was going to burn that whole legacy down, with silence sharp enough to cut bone. And that night, she told Matthew, "I need to show you something, but once I do, there ain't no going back." He looked up from his book, confused. "In the study?" he asked. Nia didn't answer. She just handed him the first letter and watched his world begin to unravel. Then, from the hallway, they heard the click. Eleanor, standing in the shadows, her eyes locked on the paper in Matthew's hand. And for the first time ever, her smile cracked. Some truths break families. Others finally set the soul free. Eleanor stood frozen in the doorway, like a statue sculpted in fear and fury. Nia saw it, the tightening of her jaw, the flutter in her throat. That letter had a heartbeat now, and it was louder than the lies she'd lived behind. Matthew looked between the 2 women, one who raised him in chandeliers and silence, and the other who stood by him with fire in her eyes and truth on her tongue. He held the photo in shaking hands. "Who is she?" he whispered. Eleanor stepped forward, each footfall like a judge's gavel. "She was a mistake," she said, low and deliberate. "A phase. A poor decision your father made during a rebellious season." Nia's voice cut through the room like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Her name was Melanie. She wrote you letters every year on your birthday. She loved you, Matthew." Eleanor's nostrils flared. "And she abandoned him," she snapped. "She chose her life over his future. We gave him what she never could. Class, protection, status." Matthew's hands trembled. He turned the photo over again, read the date. 1991. "I was born in November." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a conversation for outsiders." That word, outsiders. It slapped the air between them like a whip. Nia stepped forward, slow and steady, like thunder on bare feet. "I'm not the outsider here, Eleanor. I married into this family. I walked into your house with open hands, and you tried to cut them off at the wrist." Matthew turned to her, his voice raw. "Is it true, Nia? Is she really my mother?" Nia didn't flinch. "She is." He sank into the leather chair behind him, as if the truth had weight. Eleanor remained standing, stiff, proud, trembling. She was dark, Eleanor hissed. Not just her skin. Her life, drugs, poverty, Harlem. Matthew looked up slowly. "You mean black?" Silence. Sharp, heavy, holy. Eleanor couldn't answer, because the truth ain't always elegant. Sometimes it's just ugly in pearls. Later that night, Nia found Matthew alone in the library. The folder lay open beside him. Dozens of letters, each one soaked in the love of a mother erased. "I always felt it," he said, voice thin, like something was missing. "Like the stories didn't match. I asked once, and she said I was born in Switzerland during a ski trip." He laughed, hollow and bitter. "She lied my whole life." Nia touched his hand. "Your life ain't over, Matthew, but you gotta choose what kind of man you wanna be." He looked at her, broken and blazing all at once. "I wanna meet her. Melanie, if she's alive." Nia nodded. "I'll help you." But from the hallway, something creaked. They turned. Eleanor. Again. But this time she wasn't calm. "You will do no such thing," she snapped. "Matthew, I forbid you." "You what?" He stood up, taller than she remembered. "I'm not your prisoner." "You're my son," she hissed. "I'm her son," he said, holding up the photo. "And you made sure I never knew." Her eyes glassed. A flicker of pain crossed her face, but pride swallowed it whole. "I did what I had to do to protect this family." Matthew's voice dropped. From what? The truth? Or from blackness? And with that, he turned his back, left Eleanor standing in the shadows she built. "But Aunt Grace gonna tell you something real?" That wasn't the end. Not even close. Because 2 nights later, someone called the house. A woman's voice. Soft. Afraid. "Nia, I got your message. It's Melanie. I don't know what to say," Nia whispered. "Just say you're ready." But before she could ask where to meet, the line went dead, disconnected. And the next morning, Melanie's name was in the news. Missing. Sometimes the past don't stay buried. It blooms, like weeds in the garden they tried to keep pure. Nia stared at the television, the morning sun slicing through the mansion's tall windows like judgment. The news anchor's voice was calm. Too calm. "A Harlem woman, Melanie Langston, 52, reported missing last night. Authorities say there were signs of a struggle. More details to come." The screen showed an old photo, not the one Nia had found in the drawer. This one was more recent. Lined face, tired eyes, soft sadness in her smile. Nia felt her knees weaken. She gripped the kitchen counter like it could stop the room from spinning. Eleanor walked in, dressed in navy cashmere, holding her teacup like royalty. Eyes locked on the screen. "Oh," she said lightly. "How unfortunate." Nia turned slowly. "I called her last night. She picked up. Then the line went dead." Eleanor sipped. "You really should be more careful about the company you keep." The way she said it, like Melanie's disappearance was inconvenient. Like truth had become a stain she refused to scrub. "Did you do something?" Nia asked, voice low. Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I do many things, dear, but I don't dig in the dirt." She placed her teacup down with a soft clink. "Matthew is fragile right now. Emotions can be misleading. It would be unwise to let him drown in sentimentality over a woman who gave him away." "She didn't give him away," Nia said, stepping closer. "She was forced out. You stole him." Eleanor's face twitched. Then she laughed, quiet, cold. "You talk about theft as if I didn't save him. He was born into chaos. I gave him legacy, opportunity, a name that matters." Nia's hands balled into fists. "You mean whiteness." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper laced with arsenic. "I mean cleanliness, order." He would have drowned in her world. Nia shook her head, heart pounding. "You really believe that, don't you?" Eleanor stepped closer. "I don't believe it, Nia. I lived it. I cleaned it up. You think I didn't know about your little Harlem gallery? I knew who you were the moment he brought you home. You were a test, a phase, but now you're a threat." She leaned in. "And I remove threats." Nia met her eyes, calm as a storm about to break. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, Matthew didn't sleep. He stayed up reading every letter, eyes hollow, lips cracked from silence. Nia brought him tea, sat beside him, waited. "She's gone," he whispered. "She might still be alive," Nia said. "But we have to find her, and we can't do it alone." Matthew looked at her. "I don't even know who I am anymore." She touched his chest. "You're a man built from lies, but you can rebuild yourself in truth. I'll help you. But you have to ask yourself, are you ready to see who your mother really was, and who your mother is?" The next day, they drove to Harlem, Back to where Melanie once lived. Back to where Nia's own roots ran deep. The apartment building stood cracked and tired, but proud. Old bricks with stories etched into every wall. They met the super, Mr. Jenkins. Skin like walnut. Eyes sharp behind foggy glasses. "You look like her," he said to Matthew, peering close. "She was waiting on something these past few weeks. Kept saying he gon' come. Never told me who." Matthew swallowed. "She left no message?" Jenkins nodded slow. "Slipped this under my door. Said give it to the boy who don't know he mine." He handed Matthew an envelope. Inside, a photo of Melanie holding a newborn, a single curl of hair tucked in the corner, and a note. "They told me to disappear, but I never left you, baby. I never stopped loving you. If you find this, look behind the garden. The roses know where the bodies are buried." Nia went still. Matthew stared, confused. "Garden?" Nia turned to him, eyes wide. "She used to work for them, didn't she? The Hastings. As a maid." Matthew nodded slowly. "Then the garden. She meant that garden. Eleanor's. The roses. The perfect roses. Planted every spring with such care." Nia whispered. "You ever seen who digs those holes?" He shook his head. They rushed back to the mansion, past the marble, past the lies, to the garden. And there, beneath the oldest bush, was a rusted tin box. Matthew opened it, hands shaking. Inside, a birth certificate, a lock of baby hair, and a ring engraved with the initials M.L. Plazar H. Melanie Langston. Richard Hastings. Matthew's father. Nia gasped. She wasn't a phase, Matthew. She was his wife, before Eleanor. And just then, a shadow fell across the garden path. They turned. Eleanor stood there. No pearls, no smile, just rage. "You had no right." And from the bushes, a second voice whispered. "But he did." They spun around. Melanie, alive, but not alone. 2 detectives behind her, a warrant in hand. And Eleanor, she dropped her teacup on the stones, shattered. Eleanor didn't speak, not when the detective stepped forward, not when Melanie lifted her chin, eyes filled with all the years she'd been forced into silence, not when Matthew whispered, barely audible, "Mother." Because in that moment, the illusion cracked. The pearl-polished empire Eleanor built, it was rotting at the roots. Detective Rios, tall, caramel-skinned, eyes full of grit, held out the warrant with practiced calm. "Eleanor Hastings, you're under investigation for obstruction, document forgery, and unlawful concealment of legal records tied to Melanie Langston's parental rights." Matthew's voice wavered. You knew all along." Eleanor finally spoke. Her voice wasn't venom anymore. It was brittle, barely above a breath. "I saved you." But Melanie stepped forward then, one trembling foot after another, every step carrying decades of erased motherhood. "No, Eleanor," she said. "You stole him." The air was thick. Even the roses felt it. "I wrote you," Melanie continued. "Every month, for years. I begged to see him. I begged to hold him. You sent back silence. And money." She pulled something from her coat pocket. A check, yellowed with time, void across the front. $20,000. Memo line. Final closure. Nia clenched her jaw. Matthew's hands were shaking. "You erased her like she was nothing," Nia said. "But black women don't vanish. We endure." Eleanor's lips quivered. "Do you know what it's like?" she said suddenly, voice trembling. "To marry into power and be told you're not enough? I wasn't born a Hastings. I had to fight to belong. Melanie was never going to survive in this world. I couldn't let him drown in her chaos." Melanie stood still. "My chaos made him," she said. And with that, Eleanor fell silent. The detectives took her gently, like removing a poisonous root from a garden too long curated. As they led her away, Matthew didn't move, didn't stop her, didn't cry. He just stared at the tin box in his hands. His mother, his real mother, touched his arm. "I didn't want to force anything," Melanie whispered. "I just wanted you to know." He looked at her then, really looked. Eyes like his, cheeks like his, soul like his. "I think I've been waiting for this my whole life," he said. Later that night, the 3 of them sat in the old sitting room. Once Eleanor's domain, now stripped bare by truth. Melanie told stories of birth in a Brooklyn hospital, no father in sight, of love stolen in secret, Richard Hastings and a housekeeper, hidden behind locked doors and silk curtains. I loved him, she said. But love don't survive in houses where skin decides your worth, Matthew asked soft. Why didn't he fight for you? Melanie looked out the window past the roses. He was afraid. And fear don't raise babies. Fear don't keep promises. Nia reached for her hand. But you kept writing. You didn't stop loving. Melanie smiled, tired. I had nothing else left. The next morning, the mansion felt different. No perfume, no clicking heels, no Eleanor. Just the echo of truth, finally free. Matthew met with the family lawyer, reviewed the will, and there it was. An unsigned amendment, months before Richard died. In the event of my passing, full ownership of the Hastings estate shall pass to my biological son, Matthew Langston Hastings, and his spouse. Nia looked at the lawyer. She never filed it? He shook his head. She hid it. If this had been filed, Melanie would have had legal grounds years ago. Matthew stared at the paper, the name Langston sitting proud between his others. Then he turned to Nia. You still want to be in this house? She smiled slow. I don't want the house. I want the story to change. And so it did. That afternoon the workers came. The grand portrait of Eleanor, once hanging above the marble fireplace, was taken down. In its place, a new one, painted in soft browns and gold. Melanie sitting in a Harlem garden, arms wrapped around a baby. And beside it, Nia, head high, dark skin glowing like polished obsidian, standing, not behind, but beside, as equal, as woman. As Storm survived, but Aunt Grace ain't done yet. No, ma'am, because that night, as the fire crackled and justice finally breathed, a letter arrived. No return address, just gold script. Inside, there's more than one Hastings secret, if you want the rest. Look under the chapel floor. Nia turned to Matthew, eyes wide. What chapel? He whispered. We don't have a chapel. The letter sat heavy in Nia's lap. Golden script, no name, no trace, just that message. Look under the chapel floor. Matthew had never heard of a chapel on the Hastings estate, but the property was old enough to hide entire histories. They brought out the original blueprints, pulled from the lawyer's archives. Curled, dusty paper, ink faded with time. And there it was, buried deep in the southeast quadrant of the land, a forgotten structure. Garden house, labeled in ornate cursive. But the lines were odd, too symmetrical, too sacred. Nia pointed. That ain't no garden house. That's a chapel. So the next morning, just past dawn, they walked the grounds. The air was thick with morning fog, birdsong quiet as breath. And then, behind a wall of tangled ivy, they found it. A small stone building, swallowed by time. Vines crept up the sides like shame trying to cover sin. The door creaked open with a whisper. Inside, dust, silence, and the ghost of prayers never meant to be heard. Pews long decayed, stained glass, shattered, and beneath the altar, wood planks. Nia knelt, heart thudding in her chest. Matthew brought the crowbar. With every pull, the floor groaned like it remembered pain. Then, a hollow thud, a compartment. They lifted the final plank and found a box, not rusted, not forgotten, polished mahogany, velvet lined, sealed with brass. Inside, journals, letters, photographs, and something else, a necklace, delicate silver, with a small onyx stone, Melanie's. Nia gasped. I saw this in her photo. She said it was the only thing her mother gave her before she died. Beneath the necklace, a letter, handwritten, fragile. To whoever finds this, if the truth matters to you, keep reading. My name is Lila Mae Hastings. I was the first black woman to marry into this family. I've been erased, but I was here. They buried my portrait, my story, and my son. You are not the first they tried to silence, but you can be the last. Nia's breath caught. Lila Mae, a name that had never been spoken. Matthew flipped through the pages of the journal. She was born in 1911, a preacher's daughter from Savannah, married into the Hastings bloodline in 1935, during the Harlem Renaissance, when dreams wore silk, but the world still chained black bodies. But her marriage wasn't celebrated. It was hidden. Her portrait never hung. Her child never claimed. That child was Richard, Matthew's father. his lips parted in shock. "She was my grandmother." Nia's hands trembled around the journal. "It means Melanie wasn't the first black woman Richard loved. He came from a black woman," Matthew whispered, stunned. "Then why did he live as white?" "Because Aunt Grace gonna tell you the truth, baby. In some families, legacy is chosen, but whiteness is performed. They read until the sun set, pages full of pain, power, and survival. Lila May's writing was sharp, poetic. They let me wear the name, but never the crown. Every smile in this house is a trapdoor. One day, a woman darker than fear will walk into these halls and demand the truth. If that's you, keep digging." And baby, Nia was that woman. That night, Melanie sat in the parlor, her eyes on the fire, fingers wrapped around the onyx necklace. "She was real," she whispered, "not a rumor, not a myth. A black woman, Hastings by marriage and blood." And Nia sat beside her, voice steady. "They can't erase her now." But that discovery, it shook the house. Because 2 days later, the Hastings board, the old pale men who managed the family trust, came calling. Not with flowers, with threats. A man named Barrett Whitmore stood tall in the foyer. "We appreciate your interest in family history," he said, voice clipped. "But some stories are best left in the past. You're stirring unrest, Mrs. Hastings." Nia folded her arms. "Truth ain't unrest. It's correction." Barrett smirked. "You may have married the name, but you'll never wear it with the grace Eleanor did." Matthew stepped in. "She wore it with poison." The board issued a warning. "Withdraw from the estate, stay silent, or face legal removal." "But baby," Nia didn't flinch. That night she called the press, invited the New York Times, the Amsterdam News, and a documentary crew from BBC Black Britain. They filmed the chapel, the journals, the garden box. They listened to Melanie, to Nia, to the ghost of Lila May. And the headline that next Sunday, "The black women the Hastings tried to erase." The world was watching now. But danger? It don't back down easy. Because 3 days later, someone tried to set the chapel on fire. It was just past midnight when the smoke came crawling. Not thick, not wild, just enough to whisper danger. To say, something precious is being destroyed. Nia woke first. The scent hit her like memory. Acrid, familiar, old. She ran through the halls barefoot, silk robe trailing like a ghost behind her. Matthew followed. Melanie close behind, holding tight to the onyx necklace like it was prayer. The chapel. The sky glowed faint orange in the trees. The door stood wide open. And the air. It wept ash. They ran. And inside, through the flickering smoke, the altar smoldered. The box, the journals, the wood panels beneath it, blackened. Nia didn't scream. She didn't cry. She dropped to her knees and began pulling at embers with bare hands. Matthew yelled, "Nia, stop!" But she kept digging, kept tearing through heat and soot and time. Because when you're a black woman who's had truth stolen from her time and time again, you don't wait for permission to save what's yours. The fire department came. The blaze didn't spread far, just the altar. Contained, deliberate. An accelerant was used. A match, not lightning. Arson. The investigators left. No suspects. But everyone knew. Barrett Whitmore. The board. The men who ruled this family like a country club with iron gates and paper smiles. Later that morning, Nia sat on the chapel steps, hands blistered and raw. A single journal had survived, half burned, edges curled like grief, inside one page still whole. "I was never meant to be their legacy, but I am the root, and roots don't burn. They rise." Lila May Hastings. Nia looked up at the sunrise, blood-colored across the sky. She didn't feel defeated. She felt chosen. That afternoon, Melanie called a meeting. Not with lawyers, with elders, women from Harlem, from Birmingham, from the Bronx and Brooklyn. Women who knew what it meant to carry pain in silence, who wore their blackness like armor and elegance all at once. They gathered in the garden, the one that once buried the truth. And now, they sat in a circle around the burned box, dressed in Sunday whites. "We gon' bless this land," said Sister Aura, oldest of them all, voice raspy like sandpaper dipped in honey. "Not for them, for us." They prayed. They sang, and when the wind shifted, it felt like Lila May was listening. It didn't stop there. The press doubled down. Photos of the fire, photos of the chapel, quotes from Nia, from Melanie, from the surviving journal. Social media exploded. Lila May Hastings, the house that silenced black women. Roots, don't burn. TV anchors debated it. Was this reparative justice? Was the Hastings family responsible? Could a woman of color ever truly inherit a white empire? But Aunt Grace got a little wisdom for you right here. Power don't come from inheritance. It comes from what you refuse to let die. And baby, Nia refused. She stood on that scorched chapel floor the next week, reporters at her feet, and made her voice gospel. I don't want your pity. I don't want your approval. I want the truth to echo louder than the silence ever did. This land, this name, it's ours now, and we gon' rewrite the story in our own tongue. Melanie stepped beside her, and then Matthew, hand in hand. But power, real power, always pushes back. That night, Nia received an envelope under her bedroom door. No name, just a symbol, a small golden crown. Inside, a single sheet of parchment. Elegant, cruel. You want to be a queen, Mrs. Hastings. Then be ready for war. We know what your sister did. And if the world finds out, you lose everything. Nia dropped the letter. Her hands shook, because the name they mentioned at the bottom? Jada Langston, her sister. The one she hadn't spoken to in 10 years. The one who disappeared the night her father died. The past was knocking again. Jada Langston, a name Nia hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Not because she forgot, but because the silence was safer than the truth. She stared at the letter again. We know what your sister did. And just beneath it, a threat, cold and deliberate. Confess, or we will. Matthew paced the room, fury twisting his features. Who are these people? He snapped. They try to erase your history, then blackmail you with it? But Nia wasn't listening. Not to him. She was hearing Jada's voice in her head. Some families bury secrets, Nia. Others become the grave. The last time she'd seen her sister was at their father's funeral. The casket closed too soon. The questions never answered. He died of a heart attack, they said. But even then, Nia felt the air wasn't telling the whole story. That night, Nia slipped out of bed. She walked to the garden alone, barefoot, as moonlight bathed the roses in silver silence. She dialed a number she hadn't called since 2015. It still worked. 1 ring, 2. Then a voice, worn, cautious, familiar. Nia. Nia's throat tightened. Jada. Silence. Then, I figured it was only a matter of time before they used me. Nia's voice shook. They sent a letter. They said if I don't confess, they will. What are they talking about, Jada? What did you do? Jada laughed, but there was no joy in it. It's not what I did. It's what we did. The words dropped like bricks into water. Nia blinked, stunned. I don't understand. You will, but not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow. Same place where we buried the cassette. A lump formed in Nia's throat. The cassette. The one they hid behind the community center wall in Harlem when they were kids. Full of confessions, music, and memories. That wall was torn down years ago. But the place still stood. Nia whispered. No tricks? Jada replied, soft. I don't have enough peace left to lie. The next day, she went alone. Matthew begged to come. Melanie offered prayers. But this was between sisters. Between fire and fire. The old community lot was cracked and fenced. Weeds pushing through concrete like resistance. And there, leaning against the side of the old brick wall, stood Jada. Braids long, eyes tired, skin darker than Nia remembered. Not in color, but in shadow. They didn't hug. Too much time. Too much ache. Nia folded her arms. Tell me. Jada looked around, then pulled a small black notebook from her bag. I kept it. All of it. She opened it. Inside, photos, newspaper clippings, and a death certificate. Their father's. Cause of death. Cardiac arrest induced by unknown substance. Nia's knees weakened. I thought it was a heart attack. Jada nodded. So did I. Until I found this. She handed Nia a page. An old police report. Suspicious substance found in beverage. No follow-up due to lack of resources. Nia blinked. He was poisoned? Jada nodded. I think so. And I think it was connected to her. Nia's voice dropped. Eleanor. She offered him money, Jada whispered. I found the wire transfer in his account. From the Whitmore Trust. $10,000. Labeled Adoption Consultation. Nia's world tilted. No, that doesn't make sense. Why would Eleanor pay Daddy? Because she wanted access to something. Jada looked her dead in the eyes. She wanted you. Nia staggered back. What are you saying? She knew who you were. What you were. You were bright, articulate, dark-skinned, but palatable enough to be shaped. She wanted someone to raise close to the Hastings name, someone she could control from afar. Daddy agreed to let them watch you, test you. You think Matthew meeting you was chance? Nia's heart shattered. He loved me. I'm not saying he didn't, Jada whispered. I'm saying Eleanor designed it to happen. She had eyes on you for years. Daddy regretted it in the end. That's why he cut it off. That's why he died. Nia felt her breath leave her body. Everything. Every step forward. Every win. Every kiss. All part of Eleanor's invisible web? Jada placed the notebook in Nia's hands. Do what you want with it. But know this. If the board knows you found it, they'll come harder. This is a game they've been playing for generations. Nia stared at the photos inside. Her as a teenager, in her school uniform, smiling. Watched. Jada touched her hand. We were poor. He made a deal with the devil, thinking it would save us. I hated him for it. But I hate what they did to you more. Nia's eyes filled. And now they're using you to tear me down. Jada nodded. I let them. For a while. But I'm done. She handed her a flash drive. Everything's backed up. The whole story. Names, emails, dates. If they burn you, Nia, let this light the match. Then she disappeared into the crowd. That night, Nia didn't sleep. She sat at her desk, the drive clutched in her hand, heart torn between fury and grief. She looked out at the chapel ruins, at the garden, at the portrait of Melanie, newly hung, and she whispered, no more hiding. But just as she clicked the drive open, the power cut. Darkness swallowed the room, and from somewhere inside the house, a voice whispered her name. Nia. Nia! The voice was breathy, soft, like silk tearing, feminine, familiar, but not real. She stood still in the dark, heart pounding, every muscle tight like a pulled thread. The house, that cold, towering Hastings mansion, had never been louder. The hum of old pipes, the creak of wood contracting, the quiet, screaming. She reached for her phone. No service. The power still out. Flashlight dead. But that voice. Nia! Again. It was coming from the east wing. The one no one used. The one Eleanor always kept locked. She'd asked Matthew about it once. He said it was storage. But no one ever went near it. Nia grabbed the candle on her nightstand, lit the wick with trembling fingers, and stepped barefoot into the hallway. The walls swallowed the light. Portraits stared. Shadows moved like memory. She walked slow, every step a drumbeat. At the end of the corridor, the old oak door. Locked, always locked, except now. It stood ajar. She pushed it open. The scent hit her first. Musty paper, dried flowers, old grief. Inside, a small parlor, untouched by time. A piano covered in dust, a rocking chair, and on the far wall, a mirror, framed in gold, cracked in the corner, covered in cloth. She pulled the cloth away and stared, not at her reflection, at another woman. Dark skin, short, pressed hair, a white blouse, eyes full of warning. Nia stepped back. The candle flickered. She blinked, and the mirror showed only herself again. But something behind her had changed. A drawer, slightly open. She pulled it. Inside, a journal. Not Lila May's, not Melanie's. This one bore a name she'd never seen. Catherine Ayres Hastings, 1894. Nia opened to the first page. They say a black woman cannot survive in a house built by men who measure God in gold. But I survived. I bore his child, and when they tried to burn me from the pages, I wrote myself back in. Another one. Another hidden wife. Another erased black woman. This mansion wasn't cursed. It was architected for erasure, layer upon layer. Nia flipped the pages. More stories, more blood, more names. She saw a list. Women, dates, places. Catherine, Lila May, Melanie, and one name circled twice. Eden. No last name. just Eden. Next to it. The first, the one who made the deal. Nia whispered, "Who are you?" And from the corner of the room, the rocking chair creaked. She turned, heart in her throat. Empty. But the mirror, now fogged. 3 words appeared in the glass, as if written by breath. "She's still here." Suddenly, footsteps. Fast, heavy. Matthew burst through the door. "Nia, I heard." He stopped, looked at the journal, then at the mirror. "What is this?" She handed him the book, showed him the names, told him about the voice, the hidden parlor, the mirror. He read in silence. Then, "This house isn't just racist. It's haunted. By history, by shame, by the women they tried to make disappear." Nia nodded. "But they left breadcrumbs, one by one. They knew someone would come. A black woman bold enough to dig." Matthew's hands trembled. "My family didn't build this house. They stole it. From the women they used. From the blood they buried." Nia touched the glass again. "She's still here," she whispered. "Eden, the first." They looked at each other, and in that silence, the mirror cracked. Not shattered, just enough to mark the beginning of something, like the first scream before the storm. The next day, Nia and Matthew brought the journal to Melanie. She sat by the window, sunlight soft against her skin, and read every line like scripture. When she reached the name Eden, her fingers froze. "I've heard that name before," she said. "In church years ago. From an elder. They said she was a midwife who lived on this land before the Hastings ever claimed it. A healer, a woman of vision. They said she could see what people tried to hide." Matthew leaned in. "You think she was real?" Melanie nodded. "She was more than real. She was first. Before the papers, before the mansion, before the name Hastings meant anything." Nia whispered. "Then Eden knew everything. Maybe she left something behind. They searched for weeks. Every inch of the estate, the chapel, the garden, the east wing, even beneath the cellar where the ground turned soft and the air turned cold. Then one night, under the oldest tree on the property, Nia found it. A stone marked with a single word. Eden. Not a grave, a vault. Beneath it a box wrapped in waxed cloth. Inside, a scroll, sealed with wax, and a key. The scroll read, "To the black woman who dares to know. I left behind not just words, but witness. Unlock the past. Set us free." The key matched an old door, one they'd seen but never opened. In the library, behind a fake bookshelf, they returned at dawn, inserted the key. The door opened to stone steps, and beneath them, a chamber, lit by skylight, lined with portraits. Not of men, not of Hastings heirs, of women, dark-skinned, regal, some in lace, some in linen, all forgotten. At the center of the room, a pedestal, and atop it, a book, the true Hastings lineage, every erased name, every stolen child, every silenced mother. Nia stared in awe. "This is it," Matthew whispered. "This is the real family." And etched in gold at the end of the final page, "If you carry our blood, you carry our fire." The board tried to fight it, tried to deny the chamber, the journal, the voices of the dead. But the press had already seen it. The archives were now public. The truth, unstoppable. They summoned Nia, demanded silence. Barrett Whitmore slammed the table. "You are tearing this family apart." Nia stood, slow, calm. "No, I'm pulling back the silk and showing the rot." They threatened lawsuits. She offered the scroll, DNA tests, bank records, proof of silence paid for in checks and fear. Then she pulled out the final weapon, a letter, signed by Richard Hastings. "My legacy was never mine to control. I leave it to those who earned it, and to the women who survived it." Signed, dated, witnessed, Melanie, Nia, Matthew. The Hastings estate was theirs now. And Barrett? He didn't scream. He wept, not for justice, but because his reign was over. They held a gathering, not a gala, a ceremony, in the chapel, restored by black artisans. The portraits of Lila May, Melanie, Catherine, and Eden, all framed in gold. Nia walked down the aisle in a wine-colored gown. No diamonds, just dignity. Matthew beside her. Melanie leading the way. They renamed the estate the Eden House, for the one who saw it all, and for every woman who refused to vanish. A year later, the mansion held exhibits, workshops, scholarships for young black women in art, law, medicine. Every dollar from the Hastings fortune redirected to justice. In the grand hallway, where Eleanor's portrait once hung, now lived a mosaic, dozens of black faces, bold, smiling, soft, fierce. At the center, Nia, and above it, she was too dark for their legacy, so she built her own. On the anniversary of Lila May's death, Nia stood beneath the chapel arch, reading her final letter aloud. Melanie held her hand. Matthew held their daughter, and in the stillness, a wind passed through the trees, gentle, warm, like a thank you, like a promise kept. They said she didn't belong in that house, but now her portrait hangs in the golden frame above the fireplace. Nia Langston Hastings, wife, heir, rebuilder, not because of money, not in spite of her skin, but because she dared to walk into fire and leave it glowing. And baby, if this story touched your heart like it touched mine, leave a word below. Tia Graça vai sempre estar aqui, com histórias para almas que já sangraram em silêncio e hoje brilham em voz alta. They said she didn't belong in that house, but now her portrait hangs in the golden frame above the fireplace. Nia Langston Hastings, wife, heir, rebuilder, not because of money, not in spite of her skin, but because she dared to walk into fire and leave it glowing. And baby, if this story touched your heart like it touched mine, leave a word below.